So the right continued to gaslight us, with Graham Linhan recently claiming that he was joking about inciting violence towards trans women in women's toilets, and now they're claiming that somehow the left has a monopoly on political violence, where this couldn't be further from the truth. So I want to go over a Mehdi Hasan video where he completely debunks this and destroys this notion. Let's get straight into it.
And you're right, it is a scary time. The number of texts I've received over the last 24 hours from people telling me, stop doing public events, get more security. The US right now is not a great place to live, especially if you're in the public eye, especially if you're doing politics or journalism, as you and I are. What happened to Charlie Kirk was horrific, inexcusable. Part of an American political culture that has become very violent. We've seen over the last 24 hours, Congresswoman, the right online, led by Elon Musk and Donald Trump in his televised address, is saying, this is a left-wing problem. This is left-wing political violence. The left have demonized the right and incited violence against them. And it kind of airbrushes out, as you say, the threats against you. You've had multiple men over the years. I think in 2019, there was a guy who phoned your office threatening to kill you. They found bullets at his office. He went to prison. There was a guy from Florida a couple of years ago. I believe there's a guy in Connecticut right now being prosecuted. There's a lot of people. When I knew you were coming on today to talk about the War Powers Resolution, I actually thought, sadly, there is no more appropriate a Democratic guest than to talk about Charlie Kirk than you, because you were also on the kill list that this guy allegedly had this summer, who was obviously killed the former Speaker of the Minnesota House and her husband, and injured two others. And I just think to myself, how cynical is it for big name figures on the right, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, many others, Nancy Mace yesterday, saying this is a Democratic Party problem, as if people like you are not getting death threats all the time, credible ones.
I mean, it's actually disgusting. And you know, it reminds you that although these people pretend to be adults, that they are sometimes, you know, they think a lot less than even children do when it comes to compassion, when it comes to thoughtfulness, when it comes to being a leader. You know, I did expect the president's address to the nation would have been a lot more compassionate filled. It would have been less partisan. He doesn't even know who the assassin is for him to say,
yes,
wing lunatic. I think it kind of denigrated his status and the status of the office he holds. But what I do know for sure is that, you know, Charlie was someone who once said, you know, guns save lives. After a school shooting. Charlie was someone who was willing to debate and downplay the death of George Floyd in the hands of Minneapolis police.
I think he called him a scumbag.
Right, have no regard, downplay slavery and what Black people have gone through in this country by saying Juneteenth should never exist. And I think, you know,
was an advocate for the Great Replacement theory, which is a far-right, often anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that somehow the white majority are being replaced by so-called brown people, coloured people, which just no evidence for, pure paranoia. And call for the stoning of homosexuals. By no means a good man, claimed to be religious, but a deep, hateful figure. And you have people now saying, oh yes, you know, people, and again, I don't agree with people celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. I think that's not good for anyone. It's not good for optics. It's not good for your own humanity. Like, he's a fascist, yes, but in the current climate, does that really help us in our cause against fascism? Because they will they are the biggest cry bullies ever. They will use anything, even though they'll laugh at, you know, the attempted murder of Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's husband. They are the biggest cry bullies, and they just need to be called out because they don't care about consistent standards. They have no values. You can't even call out the hypocrisy. You just need to say, you have no values. You don't share the same values as us.
You know, there are a lot of people who are out there talking about him just wanting to have a civil debate.
Complete rewriting of history.
Yeah, there is nothing more effed up, you know, like than to completely pretend that his words and actions have not been recorded and in existence for the last decade or so.
Yeah, and the way the media somehow like whitewashing this guy as like a neutral figure is absolutely disgusting. Because when he says trans people should be treated like they were treated in the 50s and 60s, basically sterilized, violence towards them, as if they didn't exist. Like trans people for a lot of countries, especially America, the UK, they were kind of non-existent. They weren't recognized as people. That's how he sees trans people, which is disgusting. It's abhorrent. His views should not be acceptable in civilized democratic society, and we have to call that out. Yes, he was killed, and that was wrong, but also we can call out his hateful ideology and actually his contribution to the violent rhetoric and the violence. He is a Second Amendment protector. He has called for violence towards homosexuals, trans people, and said it's an unfortunate consequence of the Second Amendment when people die. Like, he is pro-violence by any means, by just any standard.
And you have people like Nancy Mace who constantly harass people that she finds inferior and wants them not to exist in this country or ever. And you have people like Trump who has incited violence against people
Yes.
like me. And so,
Yep.
these people are full of shit, and it's important for us.
Yeah, and we forget about that Trump has called for violence, insurrection. He said, beat people up in rallies in 2016. Why aren't we calling this out more? Like, we should be shouting this every day, but we don't because, somehow we're the good guys who, we're being mean by calling Trump a fascist. No, we call it what it is. Charlie Kirk was a fascist. He was pro-violence. We need to call it out.
Us to call them out while we feel anger and sadness and have empathy, which Charlie said no, it shouldn't exist because that's a newly created word or something. Like, I have empathy for his kids and his wife and what they're going through because
Same.
I do not want
No
that.
one should go through that, and we hold ourselves, I hope, to higher standards.
And we consider you and I as people of deep faith, and our faiths are based on grace and mercy, which is
And we should hold ourselves to higher standards. We should say, yeah, we have empathy for humans who have been killed, who have like suffered the death of their father, their son, and seen it on TV, and people just like laughing at it. Yes, we should have empathy. But also, at the same time, we can simultaneously say this guy was partly responsible for the environment that caused this. He was. Even in, I think in MSNBC, guy was fired for this, for saying this truth. Cancel culture is real. Like, when you call out Trump for his divisiveness, hate crimes went up when he was first elected in 2016. We have to remember this. Divisive rhetoric comes from the right. 76% of extremist domestic terrorism is from right-wingers in America. This is a fact, and we need to keep repeating it because they will gaslight us and say it's the left that the violent ones. No, it's the right-wingers.
empathy. And we want, like, for people not to dance on our grave because that is not what our faith teaches us. We want to be able to mourn and pray for the.
But the problem is the politicizing is being done by the politicizing is being done by the right. Like this is always my problem when a public figure dies and people say you shouldn't say anything negative. I'm happy to not say anything negative and let the family mourn. But it's when everyone else tries to kind of do a whitewashing of who that person was. So obviously it was inexcusable to use violence against Charlie Kirk and to kill Charlie Kirk. No one supports the killing of anyone for their speech. But then the idea that Donald Trump now says Presidential Medal of Freedom, flags at half-mast, is the same Donald Trump who didn't even show up at the funeral for Representative Melissa Hortman, who was killed in the summer, and her husband didn't mocked Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, tried to blame him for the killing. Like those kind of people, as you say, are full of shit, and we reserve the right to call them out, even at a time of tragedy and tension like this.
Yeah, as a friend of Melissa and John, to me, what was the most painful thing was the fact that they were debating their character, that they were downplaying,
they were making jokes.
Yes.
I mean, Senator Mike Lee, the Republican from Utah, the state where this happened, was making jokes a couple of months ago about what happened in Minnesota.
Yeah, and in reality, like Melissa in her public life and in her private life was somebody who was the nicest person you would ever meet. And unlike Charlie, who wanted to bail out the person who went to go kill Paul Pelosi, and put him in the hospital and wanted to assassinate Nancy Pelosi for her political ideology. It just, I just want people to live in reality and understand where the problem is, and people who are carrying out these rhetorics that are causing harm and division in our country, and not come for those of us who are just trying to tell the truth about where we are and where we need to go.
We're running out of time. Michael Hernandez asked a good question on YouTube.
We'll end there. Yeah, it's unequivocal. The violence, the divisiveness, the calls for civil war, the hysteria about invasions comes from the right. They don't care about rule of law. They don't care about democracy, free speech. They want to stoke a race war, a war where it's a zero-sum game, that somehow white people are losing their power and it's brown people that the threat. No, we need to call it out. This conspiracy theory, this great replacement, which is a far-right conspiracy theory. If you believe that, you are far-right. I'm sorry, you may not like that, but it is a far-right talking point. And we need to really step up our game now, because this is being normalized. Fascism is here. We have to fight it, but we have to fight it through our rhetoric, not through violence, because violence has no place in a civilized society. That's what they want. They thrive in it. Please don't get drawn into their rhetoric, their style, their bloodlust, because it will never end well. So please hit the like button, and I'll see you next time.